Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Bitten by Design by Annabelle Jacobs. Narrated by Antony Ferguson. Chapter 1. The taxi pulled up outside Seb's flat just as his phone started to ring. No doubt it was Jared checking he'd got home okay. A quick glance at the screen confirmed it. He'd also managed to miss a text from his sister, and he opened it to read while the driver fiddled with his meter. Forgot to let you know we got here. Sorry. Hotel Fab, Nightlife Fab, chat soon, XX. Seb grinned at the screen, more than a little jealous, but glad she was having fun. That's $22.50. The driver pointed at the meter and then looked back at him expectantly. Seb shoved his phone in his pocket and pulled out his wallet instead. It took 2 attempts to get the right money out. His head spun as he tried to focus on the notes. Bloody Jared and his insistence on just one more drink. Here you go. He handed over a 20 and a 5. Keep the change. His phone rang again as he climbed out of the cab and almost lost his footing on the slippery pavement. The rain had only just stopped, leaving the smooth concrete a little hazardous. Stupid British summers. In hindsight, the shoes he'd worn weren't one of his better decisions. The soles had virtually no grip. And it had nothing to do with the fact he was drunk. You all right there? The driver had his window half down, smirking as Seb gingerly took another step. Seb waved him off with a laugh. Yeah, thanks. As long as he could get from the curb to his front door without breaking his neck, he'd be golden. He waited for the driver to drive off before attempting the walk up the steps. No point in embarrassing himself further. If he had to fall on his ass, he'd rather do it without witnesses. With a sigh of relief, he unlocked his front door, thankful he didn't have a shared entrance considering the state he was in, and he half walked, half fell inside, kicking the door shut behind him as his phone rang again. Shit. Jared, probably doing his nut. Seb answered on the 3rd ring. Sorry, he cut in before Jared had a chance to speak. I'm home. Don't get your knickers in a twist. Jared huffed in his ear, Fuck off. You know why I'm calling. He sighed again. Seb slumped onto the bottom step of the stairs and closed his eyes. While taking over Jared's flat had seemed a good idea at the time, 2 months down the line, being this close to Primrose Hill Pack territory made Jared, and Nathan to some extent, twitchy. Their alpha, Stephen Newell, was not exactly friendly. Another sigh from Jared's end. Why didn't you answer the bloody phone then? I was 2 seconds away from coming over there. Seb rolled his eyes. That was all he needed. Jared, Nathan, and probably Luke turning up and making a scene. I was just getting out of the taxi when you called, and then I slipped. I'm just drunk, Jay, not in mortal peril. No need to call in the cavalry. He stood and quickly grabbed onto the banister when the hallway spun around him. Shit, I really need to get to bed. Or maybe to the bathroom. That last pint sat heavily in his stomach, giving every indication that it might well come back up. Call you later, okay? Very carefully, Seb turned round and began to climb the stairs, still holding his phone next to his ear. Yeah, just... Slowly, 1 step at a time, Seb carried on upwards, while he waited for Jared to make his point and go already. Something scraped across the outside of the front door, and Seb froze mid-step, suddenly feeling a lot more sober. It sounded again. Louder this time. What was that? Nathan's voice. Seb frowned down at his phone screen, momentarily distracted from whatever was outside. Where'd Jared go? Still here. You're on speaker. You know I hate it when you do that without telling me. Yeah, sorry. But seriously, what the fuck was that? Jared's voice was far too serious for Seb's liking. Imagine if he knew it wasn't the first time I heard that sound. Nothing, just the wind, probably. Really? because Nathan thought it sounded a lot like... A low, rumbling growl filled the space around him, so clear that for a second Seb thought it had come from the phone. When another followed hot on its heels, accompanied by another scrape of what he assumed were claws across his front door, Seb turned around slowly. "Seb?" Jared hissed, low and urgent. "Yeah?" he whispered back, well aware that whoever was outside was probably listening. "We're on our way." Thank God. Normally, Seb would have told him not to bother, that he was fine. He had a fair idea of who was out there. Well, not who exactly, but it would be the same ones who always did it. Normally, he ignored it. Nothing ever came of it, but for some reason this time felt different. Whether it was the alcohol flooding his body, or the fact that it was 2 a.m. and the street was otherwise deathly quiet, Seb didn't know, but he was willing to admit he was really fucking scared. He kept his gaze fixed on the front door, unable to look away. The small semicircle of glass in the top had never seemed more frightening. When a shadow fell across it, Seb gasped, stumbled backwards, and lost his footing on the stairs. With his coordination already compromised from the beer, he reached for the banister but missed by a mile. At least the alcohol numbed the pain as he tumbled forward and fell in a heap at the bottom, phone still clutched in his other hand. Now, a lot closer to the door, he ignored everywhere that hurt, and with his heart pounding hard against his ribcage, looked up at the glass and listened. 1, 2, 3 seconds passed, and nothing. Fuck. He waited another few seconds before forcing himself upright with a wince. Ow. Seb had his phone held face down on the carpet, and when he brought it to his ear, Jared's shouting filled the air. "Seb! Sebastian! Fucking hell, he's not answering! Don't ever call me that if you expect an answer." Leaning his head back against the wall, Seb focused on Jared's sigh of relief, and not the throbbing in various parts of his body. That could wait. "Thank fuck!" Jared sighed again, and Seb closed his eyes and pictured his best friend running a hand over his face and pacing. Unless they were in the car already. "You okay? Are they gone?" Ignoring the first question, Seb chanced another look at the door. Still nothing, and it felt like whoever had been out there was gone. "Yeah, I think so." "Are you okay?" Jared repeated. "Fell down the stairs." "Shit." Nathan snarled in the background. But that was kind of comforting when it was on Seb's behalf. He smiled at the thought, then abruptly shivered as the cold from the wall seeped through his shirt. It was only September, for fuck's sake. Now the adrenaline had started to fade, everything else came into sharp relief. The hard floor, the cool hallway, and the after-effects of too many beers. He felt like shit, and in no way wanted to move, but he couldn't stay at the bottom of the stairs all night. Despite all that, it was far too easy to keep his eyes closed and drift away. "I'll move in a minute." "Seb?" Jared's annoying tinny voice snapped him out of his doze. "Hmm?" Blinking away sleep, Seb put the phone closer to his ear. "Sorry." "Look, we're almost at yours. I've got my spare key, so you don't have to come down." Seb laughed, but couldn't be asked to explain why he hadn't actually managed to get back upstairs. "Yeah, okay." It must have been longer, but it felt like only a minute later when Jared opened the door and kneeled next to him. "Jesus, Seb!" Jared smoothed the hair away from his forehead, and Seb leaned into his hand. "Ow," he mumbled when Jared touched a sore spot. "That's a nasty bump you've got there." Jared touched it again, much softer this time, but Seb still frowned and tried to bat his hand away, which only made his wrist hurt, and he quickly stopped. With another muttered curse, Jared stood. "I'm calling Tim." "Oh, the hot doctor. Shame he's a shifter." He waved the hand that didn't hurt in Jared's direction. "No need. I'm fine." Jared snorted. "Of course you are.
Just drunk.
Mm-hmm. Jared turned away towards the still-open front door.
Nathan, get in here and help me get him upstairs.
Seb shivered again as a gust of wind ruffled his shirt. He frowned. No wonder he was cold. The front door was bloody open. Nathan appeared next to him moments later, and the next thing Seb knew, he was gently lifted off the floor.
I can walk,
he muttered. Both Jared and Nathan ignored him. Everything clear out there? Jared asked. Nathan grunted in affirmation. He adjusted his hold on Seb as they maneuvered into Seb's bedroom. Their scent is all over the place. I doubt very much this was the first time they've been here. Seb groaned, aware enough to know what was coming as they lowered him onto his bed.
Yeah, you fucking should groan,
Jared grumbled as he carefully unlaced Seb's shoes. His tone was a sharp contrast to the gentleness of his actions. As Jared eased Seb's left shoe off, pain rocketed through his ankle and he hissed.
Fuck, sorry. We'll discuss this when you're sober.
Talking of which, Seb opened one eye, wincing at the harsh overhead light in his bedroom, until Jared huffed and turned it off, opting for the muted glow of the bedside lamp instead.
How come you're not wasted?
He asked Jared.
We drank the same.
Jared shrugged.
I guess what little bit of shifter DNA I have dilutes the effects quickly.
He unceremoniously undid Seb's belt buckle, followed by the button on his jeans.
Or maybe it was hearing a shifter outside my best friend's door and then him dropping the phone with a pained cry.
He tugged on Seb's zip with a little more force, and Seb slapped his hand over Jared's.
I didn't drop the phone.
It made sense in his head, but judging from the look Jared gave him, perhaps it wasn't the correct response.
And stop undressing me with your boy in the room.
As expected, Nathan glared at him. He hated when Seb called him that, so naturally Seb tried to slip it into conversation as much as he could get away with.
Behave,
Jared chastised, but he motioned for Nathan to leave them alone. When he took Seb's jeans off, he was as careful as he could be, but it still hurt.
Anywhere else hurt?
Or is it just your head and ankle?
Seb pointed to his right hand. Wrist's a bit sore.
He settled back into the pillows and closed his eyes. Hopefully Jared wouldn't try and take off his shirt, because he was far too comfy to move.
Seb?
A gentle shake on his shoulder.
Hey, Sebastian.
Soft fingers tilted his chin up.
Can you open your eyes for me?
With great effort, Seb opened one eye and struggled to focus on the man in front of him. Curly black hair and blue eyes were all he could make out, with his vision still a little blurry. Blinking rapidly to clear it, he smiled as recognition dawned. Dr. Tim Walters, the Regent's Park Pack Doctor.
There you are.
Tim smiled back at him and let go of Seb's chin to inspect the bump on his head.
Ow!
You've got quite a bump there, but I don't think it's serious. At worst, a very mild concussion. The throbbing in Seb's temple begged to differ. He had to swallow a couple of times to get moisture into his mouth. Wow, that was unpleasant. The nasty taste along with his furry tongue made him grimace. Thankfully, Tim handed him a glass of water. Here, cold and refreshing, so he emptied the glass in 4 swallows. So much better.
Thanks.
Seb handed the glass back and slumped against the pillows with another groan.
Are you sure it's nothing serious? My head fucking kills.
Jared's voice piped up from the other room.
That would be all the alcohol you drank.
Oh, they're still here then. Tim grinned at him, and Seb's gaze caught on how full his lips were. Yes, they were worried when you passed out. Seb glanced down to where Tim had one hand on the bed covers.
May I?
Tim tugged the edge of the quilt to show what he meant.
I wrapped your wrist while you were sleeping, but I didn't want to check your ankle until you were awake.
Seb nodded for Tim to continue, and he slowly pulled the sheet back, then frowned.
That doesn't look too good. As soon as Tim said it, the pain in Seb's ankle made itself known, as though it had been waiting for a doctor's confirmation that it should hurt. With a wince, he pushed himself up on his good arm for a better look. Oh! Even from that awkward angle, Seb could easily see the swelling around the top of his foot and ankle, and the slight discoloration. He watched closely as Tim carefully ran his fingers over the area. "Is it broke? Ow! Fuck!" Tim immediately stopped his gentle manipulations and sat back with a soft smile. "I suspect so. You'll need to go to the hospital to get it sorted." He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket. Nathan and Jared appeared in the doorway, looking more worried than the situation warranted. Well, Seb thought they did anyway. "Hey!" He waved at them and managed a weak smile. A wave of nausea rolled through him, and he quickly shut his eyes, clenched his teeth, and breathed carefully in an effort not to throw up. Being sick in his bed, with an audience, was not on his list of things to do tonight. Or this morning, or whatever it was. His skin felt clammy, and he'd give anything for a cold flannel, but the threat seemed to have passed, for now at least. When he opened his eyes again, Nathan stood grinning at him from the door, but Jared had moved close enough to crouch next to the bed. "I've emptied out the bin in case you're sick. You went all pale and sweaty, so—" He looked back at Tim, who was typing something on his phone. "You sure it's not a bad concussion?" Tim set his phone down on the bed. His gaze landed on Seb again. "Almost certain, but they'll check it again at A&E. How much did he have to drink?" Tim had addressed Jared, and Seb huffed in annoyance. "I'm right here, you know." "Sorry." 2 spots of color appeared on Tim's cheeks, and he quickly stood, fussing with his bag. "How much did you drink tonight, Seb?" Seb tried to recall the exact amount, but even the thought of alcohol made his stomach churn. "You answer him, Jay." Seb ignored Nathan's laughter and tried to focus on Tim instead. He might be a shifter, which automatically ruled him out as far as Seb was concerned, but he was nice to look at, and Seb always appreciated a pretty view. "I reckon about 4 pints and 4 shots, so not loads, but—" He poked Seb in the shoulder. "Did you eat today?" "Yeah, of course." He'd had cereal for breakfast, a sandwich at lunch, and then some toast before he went out. Nathan was watching him as if he knew Seb was being economical with the truth, but he didn't comment. "You've downed that much before and not got ill?" Jared ruffled his hair. "Maybe you're getting old." "Fuck off, I'm 26, same as you." Tim stood and cleared his throat. "I'd really like to get you to hospital and have that ankle looked at." Seb wiped at his clammy forehead and frowned. A trip in the car was not what he needed right now. "Can't it wait until morning, when I'm not in danger of throwing up everywhere?" "I'd rather go now." Tim checked his watch. "My brother's on shift until 7, so we won't have to wait." Seb raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that favoritism?" "Yep." Tim grinned, momentarily distracting Seb with how white his teeth were. Seb strained to see if they were pointy like Jared's sometimes got, but they looked normal as far as he could tell. That made sense. Jared seemed to have shitty control over his leftover shifter traits. Nathan's control was much better, and if Tim was anything like him, he probably needed to be angry or— "You're feeling okay?" Tim snapped his fingers, and Seb startled, mortified to realize he'd been staring at Tim's mouth. He swallowed down his embarrassment and wiped at his face again. "Sorry, just spaced out for a sec. Still feeling a bit dodgy, to be honest." "We'll take a bowl in the car." Tim laughed as Seb grumbled, and then he turned to face Jared. "You two might as well go home. I've got my car outside, and we could be at the hospital for a while." Jared started to protest, so Seb decided to nip that in the bud. "It's all right, Jay. I'll be in Dr. Walter's very capable hands." For some reason, that sounded dirtier when said out loud. Judging by Jared's smirk, he thought so too. Tim smiled. "Call me Tim, please. Dr. Walters makes me sound ancient. Seriously, I'll be okay with Tim, Seb added. There's no point either of you waiting around. But we still need to discuss what happened tonight. Jesus, Seb, there were shifters, Seb sighed. He hadn't wanted to admit this, but his head ached, his limbs ached, and he just wanted to get this hospital trip over and done with. And if Jared and Nathan came along, they'd probably take the opportunity to question him endlessly, and he couldn't face it. Not tonight. Look. His voice came out surprisingly strong, considering how delicate he felt. It's not the first time something like that's happened. Admittedly, they'd never lingered around his front door before, but whatever. Nothing ever comes of it. They just like to remind me they're close by, I think. Jared's expression went from worried to outraged in the blink of an eye. On second thoughts, maybe Seb should have kept quiet. His mental reasoning wasn't the best at present. That settles it. Jared glanced from Seb to Nathan and then back again. You're definitely not going to the hospital on your own. Jared. Nathan's tone held a warning, but Seb struggled to understand what it was for. Either oblivious to it or choosing to ignore Nathan, Jared carried on. I can't believe you didn't tell me about this before now. It's nothing. It's not nothing. Fisting his hair with one hand, Jared closed his eyes as though trying to rein in his temper. Do you realize how much danger you could be in? Nathan tried again. I don't think they'd actually do anything to him, Jay. The repercussions would be... I don't give a fuck about the repercussions, Nathan. Seb could be dead by then, and no way is he leaving this flat with no one to protect him when God knows what could be waiting for him out there. It's not fucking safe. Even in his fuzzy state, Seb was aware that Jared was overreacting. Jared worried about Seb, yes, but not like this. Never over-the-top protective and unreasonable. A low growl rumbled through the ensuing silence. Seb felt it deep in his bones. He won't be on his own. Tim leaned against the wall, body rigid and hands clenched into fists. His top lip curled slightly, and Seb noticed with some interest that, yes, his teeth did go pointy like Jared's. Every time Seb had run into the doctor at Jared's place, he'd always appeared easygoing, happy. In fact, he displayed so few of the traits Seb associated with shifters, aggression, arrogance, possessiveness, that sometimes he almost forgot that Tim was one. Seb had never seen him look like he did now, all coiled power and confidence, and maybe a little pissed off, too. The sudden change in Tim's demeanor was startling and a little disturbing, and it might be the alcohol talking, but Seb found it really hot, too. His dick stirred in his boxers, and he hastily rearranged the quilt in case anything might show. The movement made his wrist twinge, and he sucked in a breath at the stab of pain. On the plus side, it took care of his burgeoning hard-on. Jared's mouth fell open, seeming as shocked as Seb by this turn of events. So obviously he'd never seen this side of Tim either, but Nathan appeared resigned, almost as if he'd known it was going to happen. Tim flexed his fingers. The smear of blood on his palms was a clear indication that his claws had lengthened too. Really pissed off, then. Tim cast a wry glance at Nathan's hulking form. I might not look as intimidating as some. Compared to Nathan, Tim wasn't as broad or as tall, but he was still about 6 foot, and Seb would bet good money that underneath his slim-fitting top he was all lean muscle. But I assure I can protect Sebastian just as well as anyone else in my pack. Oh, Seb hated his full name. Usually. But something about the way Tim said it made him feel all funny inside, and it definitely wasn't the beer this time. It might be the roughness of Tim's voice, thicker than normal and affected by his lengthened teeth, but whatever it was, Seb liked it, and didn't feel the need to correct him. Jared raised an eyebrow at him, but said nothing. While Nathan and Jared were busy having some sort of silent conversation, Seb let his gaze linger over Tim's shoulders, noticing the way the material clung in certain places when muscles flexed, as Tim stood and stretched out his hands. Yes, Seb had no doubt Tim Walters could protect him. His gaze wandered higher to Tim's face. One moment he was looking at blue eyes, full lips, and a strong jawline. The next he was faced with a snarling shifter, all sharp teeth and menace. Fucking hell. Seb's breath caught in his chest. All his aches and pains forgotten in that instant. But before he had chance to utter a word, Tim was back to normal. "Was that really necessary?" Nathan ground out, his voice rougher than usual. Seb didn't miss the way he'd moved closer to Jared. Tim shrugged, unrepentant. "I think so." He stood tall, shoulders back and chin tilted up. Jared had apparently done a good job ruffling his feathers, or, more appropriately, his fur. "I might be the pack doctor, and that position requires me to heal people rather than hurt or intimidate, but I am still a member of this pack, first and foremost, and as such I would protect any member of it with my life. For you to suggest otherwise is incredibly insulting, to say the least." Never one to know when to be quiet, Jared blurted, "But Seb's not pack." Seb flinched. That comment stung, but he wasn't exactly sure why, because Jared was right. He wasn't pack. Nathan huffed, and Tim's lips twitched as if fighting a smile. "You told our Alpha that Sebastian was like family to you, or am I mistaken?" Jared flushed and looked down at the floor. Seb grinned as warmth replaced the hurt of moments before. "Yeah," Jared said, so softly that Seb struggled to hear him. "So as Nathan's mate, anyone you class as family is automatically under the Regent's Park Pack's protection." Tim spoke slowly, as though explaining to a child. Seb's grin widened. Jared liked to think he knew everything about shifters now, but he obviously hadn't known that. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jared glared at Nathan and hit him on the arm. "For fuck's sake!" Nathan glared back at him, not so much as flinching. "I thought it was obvious." "Well, not to me." Jared sighed and rubbed at his eyes. It made Seb feel tired suddenly, and he couldn't suppress the yawn that followed. Finally, Jared's shoulders sagged, and he sat on the edge of the bed, carefully avoiding Seb's injured foot. "I'm sorry, Tim. I didn't mean to imply that you weren't capable, and I know I overreacted, but I also have first-hand experience of what shifters can do to a human." He rubbed at his shoulder, and Seb immediately felt guilty for forgetting. Of course Jared would react that way. "The thought that one or more shifters from another pack are harassing Seb scares the shit out of me." Tim's whole posture changed, and he relaxed against the wall with a short nod. "I understand. But you can trust me to keep him safe." Seb lay there feeling like a damsel in distress. A flare of irritation spiked in his chest. "And I repeat, I am right here, guys. I might not have any freaky shifter DNA in my blood, but you can't discuss me as though my opinion counts for fuck all. For once, this is all about me." The sparkle in Tim's eyes as he met Seb's gaze shouldn't have been so appealing. Seb looked away quickly, concentrating on the bandage covering his wrist as Tim spoke. "So, Seb, are you okay for me to take you to hospital, or do you want Jared and Nathan to come too?" Without looking up, Seb said, "There's no point in everyone going." He did glance up then and give Jared the best smile he could manage. "Go home. I'll call you later." "You'd better," Jared grumbled. "And don't think this discussion's finished by any means. I want to know everything." Seb held up his hand to interrupt. Yeah, I get it. But not now, okay?" "Right. Glad we got that sorted." Tim rubbed his hands together. Seb got the feeling he wanted to shoo Nathan and Jared out of the flat, but he didn't do that. Instead, he pointed at Seb's bare legs. "Let's get some clothes on you, and then we can go." Chapter 2. "Here, let me help." Tim wrapped his arm around Seb's waist and hoisted him to his feet.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?